We are at Red Hearing Awards, and we continue with the positive news coming from the VCs. So here's one more VC guy, Maximilian from Kennet Ventures, and he has another closed deal to announce.
Well, we announced the closing of our investment in BuyVIP today, one of Europe's leading online private shopping clubs. It's a company based in Spain with operations in Italy and Germany.
So it's not about just saying that there's money out there, the money is really invested yet.
Money is being invested. I mean, in the last 4 months we have made 4 investments, 5 investments in fact. We invested in GoViral, which is a Danish-based viral video seeding network, which was a bootstrap business, entirely bootstrapped until we came across the company a few months ago. We also closed an investment in Spreadshirt, which is a German business where you can personalize t-shirts online. And we made 2 investments in the US. So from our perspective at least, the investment market is alive and well.
Okay, so tell me a little bit more about Kennet Ventures. What is the specific focus of your investment?
So Kennet Partners is a growth equity investor. We focus on finding businesses that are either bootstrapped or have raised only small amounts of capital and already built themselves to 5 or 10 million euros in revenues, where we can invest in the business to expand sales internationally. That's usually the most common reason for us to invest. But we also buy existing shares from founders or from earlier investors, or do complete buyouts and recapitalizations of technology companies that might be as big as 50 million euros in revenues.
Which are the criteria you're focusing on?
The kind of segments?
No, the criteria, like if you choose a company, like you said, okay, that they are bootstrapped and that they are already having a huge market, but how do you really choose them?
Well, we are very proactive about going out and finding companies. So we decide which segments are of interest to us. We might say we like discount e-commerce websites, or that we like accounting, software as a service. And then we have a team of associates that go out and look for all the companies in that category. We call them all. We meet as many of them as we can. We start developing relationships with the entrepreneurs. And if there's a transaction to be done with one of the better ones right then we do it. And if not, we develop relationships for the future. And so sometimes it takes a year or 2 years before the timing is right for that company to raise money, and that hopefully at that point we have a relationship with them that we can exploit.
So does that also mean a general recommendation to always start with talkings with the investors really a lot of time before you really need the money?
I think it's a good idea, because not only do you then are you then on the radar of those investors, but also by talking to them you start to understand what it is that is going to make your company attractive to them, which features. I mean, this morning I gave a talk about what does the perfect business look like for a venture capitalist, and a lot of entrepreneurs don't think about these things. Things like what is your working capital cycle? Are you getting paid before you have to pay your suppliers? That's a really great thing for a company to have, is a negative working capital requirement. But entrepreneurs often don't think that way, and they might think that way if they've spoken to an investor who told them that's important. And so there are lots of little features about your business that you can fine-tune as you bootstrap it, with the investment, the eventual investment in mind.
So are you open for being a counselor for startups to give them hints how to develop and how to go ahead?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. I mean, a lot of what we do is to try to promote entrepreneurship in Europe. We talk a lot about bootstrapping and bootstrapping techniques. That was the topic of my speech this morning. I blog.
So share some bootstrapping tactics for us.
Well, I think the business model structure is one idea. I think you can think very creatively about how you acquire customers and do sales today. Everybody does Google online lead generation, but that doesn't really work so well anymore, and a lot of startups are finding it expensive and difficult. But there are lots of other ways to use the internet for lead generation. If you look at an American company called Bonobos, which is 2 guys out of Stanford University who just sell trousers online, they've done micro-targeted advertising on Facebook that works really well because it's only targeted at people who went to certain universities. So you can come up with ideas like that to acquire customers cheaply. That's very valuable. And of course, starting an internet business today is cheaper than it has ever been because of open source tools and cloud computing and so forth. So you really don't need that much capital to get started.
So you've been mentioning the sectors you're interested in before, so explain a little bit more around it. Which are the most interesting sectors?
Well, I think we look for wherever there's growth, and we're pretty agnostic which sectors that comes from. Right now we're still seeing growth in certain niches within e-commerce. We're seeing growth in certain areas of software as a service delivery, where you're displacing existing enterprise software applications with a software as a service product that costs as much as the maintenance fees on that original product. So there's a lot, I think, to be done there. Apart from that, the number of categories that are growing is shrinking, and I think as the recession bites also in Europe, I think we will see that as well. The important thing, I think, from the perspective of technology investors is that most of the big technology trends, consumer adoption of the internet, mobilization of enterprise applications onto lots of devices, etc., are far stronger and will last much longer than any recession. So just because the business isn't growing doesn't mean that it's not a good time to invest in it if you can see the long-term trend.
Tell me a little about, you said you have an office in London and you also have an office in the Valley. Tell me about how is the climate in the Valley right now?
Well, as always happens in these economic cycles, the Americans tend to feel it first, and they tend to react quicker as well. And so already in October, November last year, we saw a big adjustment in valuation expectations from entrepreneurs. We saw a big pullback of venture capital money, and we saw a very rapid decline in enterprise demand for technology products. And so that affected companies in the Valley that sell to enterprises in particular. In Europe, the effect has been seen much more slowly, and I don't think we've seen all of it yet. And it's going to come through more slowly. It probably won't be as drastic. It won't be as steep. But then again, the recovery probably won't be as strong either. So I think most of the cycles are exaggerated in the US, if you like, and slightly dampened in Europe.
But go up faster than this.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're certainly thinking that there will be a recovery. Within the next 6 to 12 months, we will start seeing the recovery. And once we see that.
So at the end of 2009, beginning 2010, we can, the European startups should head through the Valley to really get the money there, because here then and that time they have huge struggling, because then the really financial crisis will hit the most here.
I wouldn't put it so negatively. I think we will see the bottom of the crisis in terms of real economic growth and spending on technology within this year, both in the US and in Europe. And the question is, once we see the recovery taking hold in the US, I think we can assume that it's going to follow in Europe, just like the downturn did. And so we can invest against that. And I'm keeping my fingers crossed that we're going to see that this year.
Okay. And last but not least, you said that you are very engaged all around Europe, European entrepreneurship. So tell me, why is it good to start up in Europe?
Well, I think you have tremendous diversity of talent in Europe, which is pretty unique. You've got a lot of engineering talent that is, typically not easy to commercialize and needs to be unlocked, if you like. And that's one of the reasons that we like investing in Europe, because we believe that if you bring American commercial practices, sales skills, internet online lead generation skills to these European technical innovations, you can build really strong companies. And in this day and age, where the company is based doesn't really matter anymore. So there's no reason why Europe can't build the same winning companies as the US.
Thank you for that insight.
You're very welcome.